filter, etc. I've tried to keep the message relatively straightforward and relatively simple, and then hope that in the discussion maybe I can go more in depth according to your questions. So the starting point is something like this. I think if any of us opens our screen, maybe we're quite good at managing our screen, but we tend to have a sensation. Very often it is reported by users and by people who have spent a lot of time online that they are losing their attention, that somehow there is a sense of that the digital life, the digital endeavor, the time we spend online is characterized by a sort of a dramatic sense of doing to send an email and you find that you're doing something else. So it's this sense that in social sciences we call this sort of loss of agency, the loss of sense of control and on our activities. And this is something, this sort of sense of loss of attention is something that is being discussed by, I mentioned just two books that, in the last 3 years came out. One is well known, Nicholas Carr's Shallows, What Internet is Doing to Our Brains, and he sort of reports all in a very subjective way how much he is actually unable to read a full page without being distracted. Sherry Turkle takes another stance. She takes it more from a social point of view, but also in a certain sense expresses this sense of malaise, of lack of control. And this is what I would like to discuss, this sense of control. Now, very often, I mean, this is a very silly image, but when we talk of attention, when people talk of attention, they tend to start from a very simplistic cognitive model, which is that, basically the idea is that we have a lot of, sensory inputs. I can hear, listen, etc. I have a lot of stimuli in my environment. But there's something which is limiting, which is my focus, which is my attended information. So I have a lot of information around me, but I can only attend my attentional capacities, can only attend to very few elements, and therefore there's a huge filtering phenomenon. And so we have a big computational, a big sensorial capacity on one hand, and a very small attentional capacity. And so when we transfer this to the digital world, the hypothesis is that, in fact, given that we have this very limited capacity, we have had this explosion of information. So we have that what is typically digital is that we have this exponential growth of information every month, more than the whole of human history of information, etc. And so here we are, in a certain sense, with our very limited attentional capacities, flooded by this source of information. And that there is something that is adapted in some way. And interestingly, what is interesting is that a lot of the internet economy, a lot of the web economy is based exactly on that sort of model. There's this term attention economy that came out a few years ago. It was even it's always been present with the digital world, that in the idea that we have this very scarce resource, which is attention, and a lot of information, and therefore there is value to be made by being capable of attracting the attention, of capturing the attention of the users, and creating, in a certain sense, platforms, environments that capture the user attention. And that, furthermore, there is even more value being made also if one is also capable of filtering this whole information and filtering the. So if you think of it, if you think of the business models of all the successful internet companies, they are essentially around the attention economy. They really are based on the idea, they sell attention, because there's something else that has happened, is that not only can you capture, but because of the interactive nature, interactive nature of the internet, and the fact that you click, so there is an action there is a click. Suddenly, it is much easier to measure attention, and obviously the attention economy has been proper of all media, newspapers and TV, etc. in the past, but we've never had such capacity because of interactivity to actually measure attention so precisely. And when you have measurement, you then very quickly have a sort of monetization of that. There's a trading of it. And if you look at Google's, for instance, model of advertisement, and how precisely all of these elements are measured and monetized and traded, I mean, it's just a case in point, but all of them function like that. So what I'd like to discuss a bit more is around this model of, attention as, as a purely cognitive model of attention, which the individual, in a certain sense, is alone in front of all of these stimuli, and in a certain sense has, the power, the capacity, or the reflexes to focus attention. And I would like to oppose to this very individualistic model a more social model of attention. And by doing that, I think in a way, I would like also to, the consequence of taking a more social view is somehow to render even more dramatic. First of all, to modify the argument, and it's not just about the quantity of information, and the argument I'd like to make is not the quantity, it's really the way the information is organized and presented, etc., which is at issue here. It's not just an issue of quantity, and also the fact that it does rely on something which is profoundly social makes the situation, in a sense, more worrying. So let me step back. Now, there's this model, this idea that okay, the digital is is creating an overabundance of information like never before. Now, I would like to argue that we've always lived in extremely rich, informationally rich environments, and if you just walk around a city, walk around in any environment, it is full of stimulation, full of things, but somehow we have managed to cope in those environments, or we have the impression that we cope in physical rather than virtual environments. And one of the reasons of this coping is the fact that socially we have also created environments which sustain attention. And here I would like to rely on a model, a cognitive model, which is called distributed cognition, which is the idea that we distribute, in a certain sense, in the environment, in the social and physical environment, part of our processing, and that we don't have to do everything, individually. And so this silly slide I put up, I just wanted to show a number of environments, physical environments, that have been created to, in a certain sense, sustain attention, and also, indicate what has to be attended to. So, obviously a theater, a classroom, but also a museum. A museum is a good place in point, which categorizes and organizes and curates, in a certain sense, what has to be looked. And a lot of our physical environments are exactly that. They are created to indicate, what is important and what we should attend to. And even how people dress and how, our bodies, how we hold, etc., are also signaling very often, is this a person that we have to listen to? Is this a person that is worth looking at and listening to and interacting with? So this is a really, we have all of these sort of environmental props that have, over time, helped us sustain in this process of giving attention. Now, if we compare it to something, again, it's stupid to take Facebook, but I could take an email, I could take any interface. But if we compare to what we have at the moment on our screens, clearly we haven't elaborated, a level of sophistication in the signaling, in a certain sense, of what we have to look at. I mean, look at this image here. Typically I have some advertisement. I have a list of posts of which I don't know. I mean, my only criteria for deciding what to read and what not to read is the name of the people, a little indication. I mean, in a sense, the information we have at our disposal is incredibly unsophisticated and socially unstructured and very difficult to navigate in that sense. Okay, there are other aspects, of course. There's the fragmentation of it. There's many aspects that make in a certain sense, that isolate make the competition between elements extremely brutal, extremely difficult to coordinate. So I'd like to step back. This is one of my favorite pictures, and any psychologist among you will recognize what this is. I'd like to step back from this very individual idea of attention and talk of attention in other terms, and talk of attention in terms of joint attention. Now, what this picture shows is an experiment with a toddler, there's a little puppet on the side, a clown, and what this baby is actually doing, he's pointing to the puppet and checking that his mother is actually looking at that. Now, this is a very crucial point in development. It's a moment in which children, can start pointing, and it is seen as a prerequisite for language acquisition. Without this phenomena, which is called of joint attention, the capacity of pointing and checking that the mother is there, the capacity of envisaging that the baby's envisaging the fact that the mother is actually looking at the same thing, and that he is capable to elicit a certain type of joint attention onto something. Without that capacity, a lot of social activities are impossible. And so this is what is generally referred to like a joint attention, the capacity of actually not only ensuring that another person will participate into the same the observation and the same thought, but also the capacity of knowing that the other person is capable of doing it. There's a sort of reflexivity. So I know that that when I point to that, you have a certain mental representation. That I know that you actually have that capacity. And this sort of game of representing other people's mental states is something which is absolutely crucial. It is considered crucial for any form of communication. So much so that a lot of theories say that children who do not have that capacity will not develop, or it is one of the causes of autism, etc. But it is necessary for any form of social and cultural development, because you can see that from the pointing, I can start envisaging then the new states and pointing out the new states also through words and vocabulary, etc. And this whole process of joining into that mental state of other and creating joint states is really essential for any form of cultural and social construction. So to say that if we look at attention from the perspective of joint attention, rather just as our filtering capacity, we also realize that we are incredibly attuned to actually joining into attention with other people. I mean, it is something that researchers like Tomasello point out. It's one of the few species-specific capacities. This is something that we as a species can do and other primates cannot. And this incredible capacity is also what allows us to be very, very good at reading, for instance, SMSs or emails or everything that comes onto the screen, and that we are also capable, in a certain sense, of attributing so much so much relevance and meaning to it, and that's why we get so annoyed from one little SMS or one email, etc., because we are capable of thinking of what that person really meant, etc. So we have this amazing capacity of joining into attention, of actually co-constructing, and that's what the problem of the digital environment creates. And again, something about our social capacity. I'll go quickly because I realize I'm speaking too much, but is it okay? Again, about another aspect of the sociality of attention. For instance, when we start analyzing, how giving attention to other people, the social notion of giving, who do we give attention to, and how much of the status of somebody is determined by the attention we give him or her. If we give attention to somebody, we learn, and when we look at, for instance, our communication channels at the moment, you realize there's a real hierarchy between attention and the number of contacts. And here I'm not talking of attention on how much attention they require from us, but how much attention we also require from other people. So if you think at this situation here, well, now I don't see you, so you're probably all typing away or doing other stuff. But if I was to see you like in a video, basically, if I'm engaging you, like you engaging me in this situation, there are, it does require a level of attention which is rather total, and it is not surprising that, in fact, when we look at the numbers of how many interlocutors people have on something like video Skype, they're still very, very limited. We tend to have 2 or 3 people with whom we communicate via Skype. And especially with video, while when we look at texting, it increases a little bit, and email and social networking. But what we do tend to see is that there is an inverse relationship, in a certain sense, between the number of regular communication partners we have and the level of attention that those channels require in terms of mutual attention. And again, what I'm just trying to point out here, I'm just trying to signal that I think that if we start thinking about, the issues of our subjective sense of attentional loss, as described by many, not just as us trying to fight with trying to filter out all of this information, but as a social process, as something that is actually supported by our artifacts, supported by channels, and touching also in something that is profoundly social in nature. I think we have a different perspective. So again, it's to be quite honest, for instance, this experience of actually talking without, the only thing I see is myself. I don't see anyone. I just see something. Talking about attention, it's extremely difficult, because I don't have the feedback, because I don't have any form of, of control on my attention. This is one of the few cases, in a certain sense, in which I am completely, determined by my self motivation. I have very little of support from the external environment on my attention. So to get to the point of our OnLife initiatives, starting from the idea that there is a social nature. If joint attention is such a critical condition of characteristics of human cognition, what is happening online? What is happening in environments in which, by definition, the economic model is one of trying to grab the maximum of attention? That by definition, in a certain sense, we have a system which is quite flat in terms of attentional support, but at the same time is built on the idea of trying to capture other people's attention at a maximum. And that is where we, with Claire Lobé-Marais, with whom I've been working on this notion, and she started borrowing an idea from Paul Virilio, who a few years ago, when talking of the digital, started to mention the idea of a grey ecology, so opposing the idea of opposing the idea of the green ecology, an idea of a grey ecology, where obviously grey refers to our mental capacities, etc. And the idea behind the grey ecology is really that there are forms of pollution in a certain sense from the digital, and usually when we think of ecology and digital, and we think of e-waste and dumps of computers in Ghana, etc. But what Virilio wanted to point out was the fact that, are there things that are happening? Are there other byproducts, that are happening related to mental capacity? And here again, so we have sort of grasped on the idea of the grey ecology and are trying to work on it and say, does it make sense to think about it with respect to attention? I think that the principal idea, there are many very reactionary, in a sense, stances around, around attention, and I'm well aware there's a number of issues that are being discussed, which very often want to simply have a very dystopian view of the digital, of technology, and just want to reduce the impact of technology. I think what we want to discuss here is really to think about, rethink about the notion of agency and address this sensation of loss of control and loss of and reintroduce in a certain sense an idea. Well, okay, we are playing around here with something which is, a really fundamental element of human sociality, because attention is not just a question of information treatment; it's so important for human sociality. And so, what is happening? What is happening here? So, the idea of ecology is really to sensitize, in a certain sense, to think of a terminology, in a certain sense, to think about these phenomena, the mental phenomena in a different way. And can we actually think of sustainable, technologies with respect to communicational, attentional, etc. processes? So one of the ideas that we have been toying with, which is really much of a metaphor, and here I'll stop because I realize that I've gone far beyond what I should have. One of the ideas we've been toying with, is just to borrowing. Elinor Ostrom is a Nobel Prize. Sorry.
Nobody's impatient, so you can deploy what you have to say.
Yeah. Okay. No, but I'd rather have some feedback. I find this really very, very difficult. The only thing I see is myself. It's really quite tough. No, it's really difficult not to have any form of eye contact with anyone. It's an interesting experience, to be honest, but it's difficult. So one of the concepts that one of the ideas we're toying with a little bit is how can we think of sort of attentional commons? Elinor Ostrom is a Nobel Prize for Economics. Her work notably was on commons, on the idea of commons, that she worked on common in fisheries and various sort of agricultural commons, and she actually designed a number of principles, in a certain sense, conditions for good local common resource management, you know, and again, very much in the physical world. But I think, I mean, if I read through this list, there's a number of things that I find extremely evocative when we think about, you know, our attentional spaces. So, you know, clearly defined boundaries, you know, rules regarding the appropriation and provision of common resources that are adapted to local conditions. You know, again, if we think of, you know, very, very brutal, global, in a certain sense, platforms which are completely, you know, disengaged from local spaces of attention, you know, which are providing, in a certain sense, contents that are totally totally generic. Collective choice arrangements that allow most resource appropriators to participate in the decision-making process. You know, again, an idea of re-entering control. Effective monitoring by monitors who are accountable to the appropriators. You know, do we need a sense of vigilance around the issues of attention? A scale of grade-weighted sanctions for resource appropriators who violate community rules. Again, I'm just reading out, you know, the principles of resource management, and just thinking whether, you know, these are, you know, do these apply to our digital spaces as well. Mechanism of conflict resolution that are cheap and easy access, self-determination of the community recognized by higher level authorities. You know, again, I find them quite evocative, is thinking about, you know, what type of platforms can we envisage in which, you know, in which there is a sense of greater agency and rather than a passive sort of unsustainable conflict around this. I think I'll stop here. So I'll let some questions, so I get a little bit of feedback, and then I can continue.
Okay, thank you. Oh, let me come with the webcam. Yes. Hello. So thank you for this presentation. I have a few questions, different questions. One was Stephanie was asking a question about the comparison. Would it be useful or not to compare with the medieval market space or not? But I'm not sure. She says we could try and compare today's digital life with the medieval marketplace. You see this chat, Stefana? It's
yeah, I didn't see it, but
I don't understand, not during your talk, but I invite now to see. And so, what's the strategy of medieval people in the marketplace focus on their attention? Into that question, I would answer to Stephanie and Franco. I think both tend to wonder, is there really something new? I just want to testify that, Stefana, you were the one also in the beginning of the exercise saying, let's not overstate what is new, what is not new. But I will defend and support you in defending, but they are challenging, so the debate between you and them can go on, and I will disappear. But I think that indeed the fact that we have an explosion of data and of attention-sucking device is something that is new for our generation, because it is not the same to seek for knowledge and to wonder and to have the freedom of interpretation. It's not the same than to be drawn by people who want to attract your attention and have specific messages for you. So I think that this explosion of information and overabundance is new. That doesn't mean that we will not develop the appropriate tool and make sense of this new situation and accommodate, of course, with it. So maybe the first thing, Stefana, to address is, to what extent can we use what was developed in the past, either the medieval marketplace or knowledge tools before we had this explosion? How can they remain valid or not in the current era?
Yeah, I mean, when I showed that little picture of, you know, of the theater or the school, I mean, what I was trying to point out there was the idea that I'm a firm believer in the idea that, you know, cognition is distributed and that we're not, you know, doing all the difficult work by ourselves, and that in fact that we have you know, created a huge amount of, you know, artifacts, processes, social, social indicators and markers, among other things, also to manage, this issue of, what should we be, how do we filter, how do we attend. And if you think, the school is a perfect example. I mean, the first years of school are totally dedicated, in a sense, to teach children to pay attention, so pay attention. There's sanctions not to pay attention, there's exercises to pay attention, etc. So I mean, there's a huge social effort, in a sense, to channel, etc. But and I mean, this is a really banal Foucauldian approach, but it's not just about the process. It's also about how the body sits, how you look, how and what you attend to, and what is what should you be attending, what is important. So yes, I mean, I would agree, in what we had in the marketplace, what we had everywhere else, obviously was a huge number of techniques and social situations to organize that knowledge, and the marking was much stronger. Now, the argument that I'm doing here, I don't think. I mean, I think there is a number of things that are new in the online, which is not only the quantity but also the nature of the data that is there. There is something about the structure of how the data is organized, that the fact that it is the similarity of many of our interactions, of our actions, the similarity of many of the ways in which the information is decomposed and organized, etc. There is the coding of reality in a certain way, has probably is also flattening still at a certain level the information available. And if I think back to some of the work I've done in professional environments, in which, so let's forget Facebook, and let's forget that, even if we just look at the professional environments, and the type of operations that people have to do, when they're in a call center, when they are in a medical center, when they are commanding a nuclear power plant, the operations that are operated on, the actions that are done, have a similarity structure which is very similar. I always remember there's a very nice cartoon of, on one hand, I can't remember who did it, a guy playing the drums, chatting on the phone, etc. And then now, in front of the computer, a guy talking, and now in front of the computer, somebody, doing another activity, and now in front of the computer, and you have this match between the whole types of activities. And then, so what I'm pointing out is that, I mean, there is something that the transformation into the type of actions and the way we're doing it, I think is quite new. And for me, that simplification, or that transformation into something which is more generic, is probably more problematic from the attention point of view than the quantity. I don't think the quantity is necessarily the problem. I think it's the redescription which is the problem.
Mm-hmm. I was thinking, listening to you, two things. Because you were insisting on the settings that you have showed us, theater, the classroom, and in fact, when you see now all the discussion about learning and school and how they should integrate the new modalities, it's all about the fact that the teacher is not, to some extent, legitimate anymore, or we don't think that the best learning is by the teacher attracting all attention, but instead that pupils or ourselves should be free to pay attention to what is around us, and the teacher doesn't deserve attention, but instead should help everybody to have the right attention. It is really a change in, and I was thinking that liaise to the way Jean-Gabriel Ganachia speak about the evolution or disappearance of authority as it used to be in the past. I don't know if you would agree with this link, or if you think it's a misinterpretation. And
No, I
the
think
second thing I was wondering is the link between attention and memory.
mm,
It's I learned in a recent conference, the work about memory, the fact that we more and more have in our mind process things more than content things. We know where we have filed something. We know so that the memory space is very much becomes processual much more than content-wise. And does this impact on the attention we pay to each other? So is there a link between attention and memory and the evolution of
first point, the point about the schools, I think what is interesting, I'm always interested on the points of conflict. I have the impression that around distraction and attention, I find it always very interesting to look at. The intergenerational conflicts around these things, because they're always good indicators of social norms and normativities and how and the evolution of them. And so, in any observation, in any, we do a lot of, and I've done a lot of research in households and families, and we know that a point of constant conflict is, children's attention, how much time, and the negotiation of how much time has to be dedicated to games and TV and this, etc., etc. As and around this notion of the multitasking, how good the young people are multitasking, or how, etc. You really see there's a lot of very trite discourse around that, very repetitive discourse around it, which I find quite interesting, because I find it very revelatory of something. And I think probably what it reveals is exactly the point that you're saying, which is the point around authority, is that by, when you challenge, in a certain sense, the idea of, what I should attend to, what I have to you're really challenging a very fundamental way the authority of, who has to, who has the right, in a certain sense, to be autonomous in one's attention, but also who has the right to decide what we should join into attention of. If this attention process is a collective one, there's a collective negotiation, and there are social norms about, okay, what should we attend to, so that's definitely the notion of authority. So I would perfectly agree that when in the classroom, in a certain sense, you break that and you say, okay, the teacher is not anymore the point of attention, the focus of attention, but she's a facilitator. You are breaking a fundamental principle of authority, and that's but what I find interesting now is that while we're breaking this, so on one hand there's a sort of, let's call it a sort of democratization of this, but on the other hand, if we look at the web platforms with which we operate, we have another logic completely, which is a much more centralized logic. The idea that we how shall we say, there's a concentration on few points of attention, so if again, when we do studies on what people do on the web, you realize that most people look at 3-4 websites a day. That's they always go to the same points. It's always the social networking, there's always the search, there's the traditional media. So on one hand, you have the breaking of the attention authority, okay, and which would mean a sort of empowerment and localization, etc. But on the other, you have a logic of centralization, centralization of attention, exactly. So you have these two together, and and I find that's why I find it so problematic. So I'm all for the breaking of, the authoritarian sort of figure of attention, but then I want the attentional commons. You see what I mean? Then I need the commons. I can't have the monopoly. Okay, if we break that one, we can't substitute it with a purely business monopoly.
And on the joint attention, your preferred picture, as you say, and I really like it too. But is there is also, I was chatting on that, the need to not go excessively also in putting ourselves in the mind of others, because then this become, so it's also about the right balance. And I was wondering if you noticed or if in research there is a reference about gender different. So is the quality of this joint attention different? And is there any way to know if men and women deserve different forms of attention to each other?
Yeah.
We know that the
So
way men and
the,
women
the
look at women and the other way around are.
I don't know. I mean, you know, the studies on communication, the ones I'm referring to, and that picture refers to, which are, you know, the studies, as I said, for instance, of Michael Tomasello on communication. They really are comparing species. So it's between species, and you know, and how fundamental this capacity of mind reading is for the whole construction of language and of social relations. And it's not. There is another, if we want to talk about gender, there's another level. So in a sense, it's such a fundamental mechanism that, you know, it tends to be described as a universal mechanism of, you know, of mental coordination in a sense. But if we want to talk of gender, what we do have, no, we do know, and that's what I mentioned it very quickly in a slide. What you do have is, you know, who should you give attention to in a sense, and we know that there are gender phenomena around that, you know, about, you know, who is worth listening to, attending to, giving attention to, and there we know there are other studies showing, you know, that you have gender differences on, you know, people who expect to be listened to or expect to, you know, give attention to other. There there is data around that, but I would say it's a second level of, you know, it's not so much in this fundamental capacity of actually recognizing the relevance of others' thoughts and ideas.
Mm-hmm. I think and your link to Oliver Strom, unless I can only encourage the participants to raise their hand if they want the floor. And in the meantime, maybe ask you, Stefana, a little bit about your ideas about the concrete. So we have this the attentional commons over there. In the manifesto, we mentioned, for example, considering attention as some control of our own attention as part of what it means
Yeah.
the dignity of a human person. So something linked to the Charter of Fundamental Rights, bringing attention in there. So these are concrete ideas, but do you have more concrete ideas where at EU level or in the UK context, because you are based in the UK, or in the Swiss, because you know the Swiss? So in what context do you see, what type of, how would you like your ideas to be taken into account by policymakers?
Yeah, there's a number of issues. I think, I mean, at a very you know, macro level, but I mean, this is, I mean, it's probably too macro to I think I would like there to be a certain discussion and recognition of the fact that when we take as unique in a certain sense economic model, the model of you know, attentional economy of attention, I think it's not neutral. Okay, I think that when one starts trading on attention, I would like it to be, you know, that we should be very clear about, you know, what are we trading here. You know, it's part of, you know, as I say, and what I, you know, very quickly and very brutally tried to express here is the idea of, you know, what an important human faculty it is that attention is, and therefore, you know, we are trading, and that it is of the same nature of trading labor and trading other of our, you know, human prerogatives in a certain sense, etc. So there is a critical thought around this, that it's not neutral. Okay, that when we talk of attention economy, this is not neutral, and that it has consequences, and that the consequences that we are seeing, we're already seeing them, because, you know, because we have so much.
We heard, let's say we are convinced by what you say and we see the consequence and we wish, okay, to balance this view with other views. How would you do it? Are you saying that we have first to start using other rhetorics, or are there more concrete ways through which we can put sort of the foot in the door to
I actually think that a lot of the regulations that are actually currently being discussed, about privacy, also have implications for attention, and that when sorry.
In the good or the bad direction? In
a good direction, actually. I think there is a lot of parallel between the two, because because a lot of the mechanisms for the collection of the data on an individual user are of the same nature, exactly what make, in a certain sense, the value. In a sense, it's exactly because that data is personal, private, etc., that it also acquires a certain value, and therefore can be monetized, etc., etc. And therefore, I have the impression that maybe what we could do is to, see if some of the discussions around privacy, if we can sort of enlarge it to also consider the issues of attention around it. Maybe they also take a different value, but we have to recognize that somehow the two are connected. I see a question here. Attention economics is not just about trading, but conserving and recognizing the value of human attention. Yeah, no, I perfectly agree. What did Adam mean?
I was answering, yes, but value in a sense of, what economics do with value is then put it in the modeling of how much value we have and how we trade about it and how we optimize the function. So it's I would say, to replying to Adam's point, that of course attentional economics go there, but the problem of the economic approach, if it's taken beyond what it can bring, is that it considers attention as an item or a commodity, and breaking attention down to different things is precisely what not change the quality of it, and so it's not so much more or less value or protecting the value, but it's protecting its integrity in a sense. I don't know if you would agree, Anna, but that's how I understand your message. Oops, okay. So Stephanie, you say, who recognizes the value of human attention? Who does it? How does it achieve recognition? Is this a question to Stefana? Yeah, and also about advertising. Yeah, it's not for or against advertising here, because advertising is only one phenomenon where attention is courtisé. It's not only advertising; it's a lot of different things, news, and so it's not focusing on advertising, I think.
No, but I think the point is that some of the arguments that have been used against advertisement are the same that could be used here. Yeah, I think it's a fair point. I think that there are some elements, but the scope. There has been, in a certain sense, over time, and I think there's a long history, in a certain sense, of control of attention. I mean, it's something that because it is so crucial in the definition of so many of our social relations. There is a history of control, and the example of the school is one. The fact that we have to enculture children into attention and giving attention to writing is a case in point. I mean, in my own research, what I have done is looking at also how personal digital devices are being received, in a certain sense, in a completely different way according to the social status of the person and the professional environment in which they are. So one of the things I pointed out is that if you are working in a creative company, you can do basically whatever you want. If you are considered a person that can be trusted, you are trusted with a whole plethora of digital devices. As you go down the rings of professional order, in a certain sense, there is a greater control on the instruments that you use. And this is just a last sort of example and case of the type of control one that is exerted over attention. So the argument here is actually
control of attention is much more stringent, I would say, in management processes, labor processes, or as you say, in school and education. Advertising is more about this is teasing your attention. You're never forced, so to speak, to pay attention. So that's why I wouldn't. Answering to Adam, saying that I don't know to which debate to refer to, but this issue of attention is much wider and not targeting at all the issue of advertising, but much more the way we look at each other, what we expect from each other in all situations of life, from teaching to work, in fact. No.
There is, and there is also yeah.
I cut your inspiration.
Sorry.
Yeah, my speaker is off. But did you put your speaker off? Okay. So Stephanie, you can say that I'm speaking through your mic, Franco.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we have 6 more minutes to go. Does anyone want to raise an issue beyond the one we have addressed? Or Stefana, a last word? Or Franco, do you want to come bring yourself to the floor? Yeah, maybe put one of your objections, because yeah, come on.
No, I had no objections whatsoever.
Yes, but
I believe that there are different aspects when we speak about information overloading. There is a genuine, so to say, attempt from more than one classical friends of computer science to frame information, to structure information, to retrieve information, to categorize information, to attach semantics information. So all of these, I think, will naturally try to continue. What is, in my view, new during these days is the scale of production information and consumption. And therefore, from that point of view, we need what I call a pragmatics layer, a better understanding of today's trends to derive new principles that are generally societal principles, philosophical principles, or rules of the game principles, and therefore it has not that much to do with the technology itself. So that gap, I think, is missing. Otherwise, if we speak in terms of um, um, simplifying or finding an interface, a filter, customizable and adaptable even to the needs of the people. That is well-known problem since, let's say, 2 or 3 decades. And I remember the summer research during the 90s on intelligent agents, on instructing and training your intelligent agents.
But but wait a minute, because the way we use the word smart, showing that someone intelligent is someone who does what is expected to do.
Yeah.
So that is someone obedient. That's someone intelligent, an obedience agent. So that shows how
Firefly
intelligence and attention has been decoupled.
But I tell you that there were agents that were learning from your own, so to say, behavioral pattern, not that you gave you could instruct them, but they could learn from your own behavioral
but they
patterns.
were then instructed to learn. So we come to the same point.
But I mean the knowledge they accumulated under the form of assertive assertions um, was totally unpredictable because it depended really on the actual action and interactions of you with the other agents and with the agents itself. So there are these kind of things, but still, in spite of that tentative, there is still a need to reflect on new rules of the game, or new norms and values, or new rules. So that's what I wanted to say. I wanted to distinguish between these two levels.
And basically, I think that it's also that things that were obvious to philosophers, that, for example, you don't know exactly what knowledge is and mean, and that you cannot have perfect knowledge. Uh, Still, now this is commonsensical, because before you could think that, okay, an expert knows everything about something, and also that basic rules of politeness. I think that
Yeah.
now we are going to be allowed not to answer to all emails we receive, because at one point that will not be possible anymore. So the rules of what it is to be polite, what kind of attention we have to pay to the
Sure,
others
sure.
is
We are
something. Yeah.
far away from doing that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
do you allow me just to say
Two more
two
minutes.
words?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I think here we come the point of connection with the future. So a bit of advertising, if you allow me to do
Mm-hmm.
that. So basically, in about 1 year, we will have a big transformation here, big renewal of the institutional framework. We're trying to prepare ourselves for that reflection, and because this reflection involves really a lot of overflowing of information, and that's one way to say explain the Futurium. The Futurium is a very simple way to frame the dialogue, to frame the type of content, let's say, that is exchanged and is co-created for reflecting for the future. And so basically, it's interesting to see how the better and different and alternative observations of today's trends as done by the manifesto would be reflected into, as Nicole said in the beginning, into ideas for policies. So that's a big challenge. It will be for sure a challenge in, especially if we will be overflooded by different views in making sense of the conversation. Already the five slots we had on OnLife on the webinar already produced quite a lot of, I think, of good hints. How to translate these hints into concrete policy making is another story, and I think it's still a challenge ahead. And I really do hope that the meeting of the workshop of the 9th of July will allow us to progress in that direction in a way that the manifesto will really be translated into maybe few but really substantial ideas for policies. Maybe not exactly specific, very detailed at this stage, but
Yeah.
at least on broad directions,
we,
scoping
we,
where
we,
the
we
attention
can
is needed.
yeah, we can in our basket have framework IDs, principal IDs, and concrete IDs, so we can allow for different granularity in the level of policy IDs. They are all welcome. Now, so thank you, Franco, for organizing all this, for setting up Futurium, the webinar, and for allowing OnLife to bear fruits in this perspective of the digital futures. I think that's a perfect framework to channel the ideas that flow from our exercise. And Stefana, thank you to you for
No,
having
thank you.
brought us this valuable material and this experience that you said.
I like the idea. I like the idea. The content. This is exactly what I think. These commons should be like. It's focused. It's monothematic. It's around. It's around one theme. This is exactly what I think. A common, non-invasive space should be. But then there's a whole adaptation to the fact of seeing, not seeing, etc. So no, it's a very positive.
Yeah, it's a great project. Thank you. So thanks, Franco. Thanks, Stefana. And I think this is the end. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye
Or the
bye.
beginning.
Oh,
Yeah.
the beginning.
Bye
Thank you
bye.
very much.
Thanks.